Captain Jake Morrison stared at the screen showing the planet below. The blue and green world of Kepler 442 looked peaceful from space. 3 years ago, he had helped bring the first families to this world. Now he was coming back with supplies for the growing colony. "Captain, we're getting a signal from the planet," said Lisa Parker. She was his chief engineer and had been with him for 5 years. Her face looked worried as she checked the instruments. "Put it through," Jake said. He expected to hear good news from the colonists. Maybe they had found new mineral deposits or their crops were doing well. Instead, a woman's frightened voice filled the bridge. "Terra Nova, this is Helen Carter at Colony Base. We have an emergency. The aliens came 3 days ago. They're making us leave, all of us. Right now." Jake felt his stomach drop. Helen Carter was the colony administrator. She was tough and smart. If she sounded scared, something was very wrong. "Helen, what do you mean they're making you leave?" Jake asked. "Who came?" "Zephyrians. A whole fleet of them. They have some kind of official order. They say all humans have to get off this world in 3 days or they'll start shooting." Ryan Cole, the navigation officer, turned in his chair. He was young but good at his job. "Captain, I'm picking up alien ships in orbit, big ones. Military class." Jake's hands tightened on his chair arms. The Zephyrians were one of the 3 big alien powers in this part of the galaxy. They looked like tall, thin humans but with gray skin and huge black eyes. Usually they ignored human colonies. Why would they suddenly care about one small farming world? "Take us down, Ryan. Fast approach to the main colony site." The Terra Nova dropped through the atmosphere. As they got closer, Jake could see the problem. Huge alien ships hung in the sky like metal mountains. They were dark and threatening. On the ground, humans ran between buildings loading trucks and small aircraft with whatever they could carry. "My God," whispered Dr. Amy Foster, the ship's medical officer. She was looking at the scanner readings. "There are thousands of people down there. How are they going to evacuate everyone in time?" Jake opened a channel to the colony. "Helen, we're coming into land." "How many people need transport?" 8,412, Helen's voice came back. "Including children. Jake, they're not just doing this here. I got messages from 3 other colonies before the aliens cut our communications. They're making humans leave everywhere." The Terra Nova landed at the main spaceport. Through the windows, Jake could see families hurrying toward any ship that could fly. Children cried while their parents tried to pack years of their lives into small bags. Old people sat on boxes looking confused and tired. Jake stood up. "Lisa, get the cargo holds ready for passengers. Take out anything we don't absolutely need. Ryan, contact Earth Command. Tell them what's happening here." Amy set up medical stations in the holds. "We're going to have a lot of scared people on board." He walked down the ship's ramp onto the landing pad. The air smelled like burning. In the distance, he could see smoke rising from several buildings. The aliens weren't waiting for humans to leave nicely. Helen Carter ran up to him. She was a small woman with gray hair, but she had the kind of strength that came from years of frontier life. Her clothes were dirty and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Jake, thank God you're here. We can fit maybe 300 people on your ship if we pack them in tight. But look around. We need 20 ships like yours." Jake looked at the chaos around the spaceport. Families sat in groups waiting for any ship that could take them. Some people were arguing about what to bring. Others just sat quietly, staring at nothing. These people had come here to build new lives. Now they were losing everything. "What exactly did the aliens tell you?" Jake asked. Helen pulled out a small device and played a recording. The voice was mechanical, translated from the alien language. "By order of the Zephyrian Confederation, all human settlements in designated space sectors must be evacuated within 72 hours. Any humans remaining after this deadline will be considered hostile occupiers and dealt with accordingly." That's it? No explanation? No negotiation? Nothing. They just showed up and started the countdown. "Jake, some families have been here for 3 generations. This is their home." A loud noise made them look up. One of the alien ships was moving lower in the sky. A beam of red light shot down and hit a building on the edge of town. The building exploded in flames. "They're destroying empty buildings," Helen said quickly, "making sure we know they're serious. So far they haven't hurt anyone, but they will if you don't leave," Jake finished. He understood now. This wasn't just about one colony. If Helen was right about other worlds, this was something much bigger. His communication device buzzed. It was Lisa calling from the ship. "Captain, I'm getting reports from Ryan. Earth Command says this is happening all over human space. Dozens of colonies are being evacuated. The aliens are calling it cleansing operations. Jake felt cold despite the warm air. Humans had been spreading across the galaxy for almost 300 years. There were colonies on over 40 worlds now, with millions of people. If the aliens were really forcing everyone to leave. Helen, how many ships do you have here? 17 that can make interstellar flight. Most are small cargo haulers or personal craft. Maybe we can evacuate 1,500 people total. That leaves almost 7,000. I know the math, Jake. Helen's voice was bitter. We're trying to call for help, but the aliens are jamming most communications. Your ship getting through was lucky. Jake made a decision. We'll take as many as we can. Priority goes to families with children and anyone who's sick or injured. The rest will have to wait for more ships. For the next 6 hours, Jake and his crew worked to load refugees onto the Terra Nova. The cargo holds filled with frightened people. Families huddled together on the metal floor. Children asked their parents why they had to leave their homes. The parents had no good answers. Lisa did amazing work making the holds livable. She set up basic life support, temporary sleeping areas, and even a small play space for the youngest children. Amy worked constantly, checking on sick passengers and giving medicine to those who needed it. Ryan kept in contact with other ships in the system. The news got worse every hour. More alien fleets were arriving. More ultimatums were being delivered. It was becoming clear that this wasn't about one planet or one colony. The aliens wanted all humans gone from this entire region of space. As the Terra Nova lifted off with 312 refugees in its holds, Jake took one last look at the planet below. Fires burned in several places now. The remaining ships were still working to evacuate people, but there wasn't enough time or space for everyone. Where are we taking them? Ryan asked. Earth Command suggests the colonies in the Centauri system, but if this is happening everywhere... Jake stared at the stars ahead. For 3 centuries, humans had reached out to those stars, building homes on distant worlds. They had thought the galaxy was big enough for everyone. Now it seemed the galaxy disagreed. Set course for Earth, he said quietly. If the aliens don't want us out here, maybe it's time we went home. Behind them, Kepler 442 grew smaller in the distance. In the cargo holds, refugees tried to sleep on metal floors, dreaming of the homes they would never see again. The Terra Nova flew toward Earth, carrying the first wave of humanity's great retreat. But Jake didn't know yet that retreat was only the beginning of the story. He didn't know that Earth was about to show the galaxy what it meant to reject humanity's children. He just knew that right now, people needed help, and he was going to give it to them. The stars ahead looked cold and unwelcoming. For the first time in centuries, humans were not moving toward them, but away. 3 months had passed since Jake Morrison first saw the evacuation at Kepler 442. Now Commander Pete Johnson stood on the bridge of the cargo ship Big Sky, watching another human world die. New Dakota spread out below them like a green carpet. For 60 years, this planet had fed half the human colonies in this sector of space. Sir, the crystalline ships are moving into attack position, reported his communications officer, a young woman named Carol Wright. Her voice stayed steady, but Pete could see her hands shaking as she worked at her controls. The alien ships looked like floating crystals the size of mountains. They caught the light from New Dakota's sun and threw it back in rainbow patterns, beautiful and deadly at the same time. The crystalline Dominion had always been strange neighbors to humanity. They lived in ships made of some kind of living crystal that humans still didn't understand. Usually they kept to themselves. Not anymore. How much time do we have? Pete asked. The evacuation order expires in 18 hours, Carol replied. But the crystals are already starting to target the grain storage facilities. Pete nodded grimly. The aliens weren't just forcing humans to leave. They were making sure nothing useful remained behind. On the planet's surface, he could see the glow of energy weapons destroying buildings and equipment that had taken decades to build. Dr. Susan Blake was down there somewhere, trying to save what she could. She had spent 20 years developing new crops that could grow in New Dakota's soil, wheat that could handle the planet's long winters, corn that grew twice as fast as Earth varieties, vegetables that tasted like home but could survive in alien dirt. Pete's communication system buzzed. It was Susan's voice, tired and desperate. Pete, are you there? I need more time. Just 6 more hours. I can save the seed bank if you give me 6 more hours. Susan, the crystals won't wait. You need to get to the evacuation point now. You don't understand. This isn't just about seeds. These plants are the result of 20 years of research. If we lose them, the colonies that survive will starve. Earth can't feed everyone who's coming back. Pete looked at the crystal ships floating above the planet. Their weapons could turn the entire surface into glass if they wanted. But so far, they were only destroying human-made structures. Maybe they would stick to that pattern for a few more hours. Where are you now? Research Station 7, about 50 kilometers from the main city. I have 3 other scientists with me. We're trying to download everything to portable storage devices. Pete made a decision that could kill them all. I'm sending down a shuttle. Be ready to run when it arrives. 2 hours later, Pete watched through his ship's cameras as the shuttle landed near the research station. The building was partly destroyed, but Susan and her team ran out, carrying bags of seeds and data storage devices. Behind them, crystal energy beams were systematically destroying everything they had built. The shuttle pilot was Tony Martinez, an experienced man who had flown rescue missions before. His voice came over the radio as he loaded the scientists. Got them, Commander? But we've got problems. Crystal ships are heading this way. Get out of there, Tony, fast as you can. The shuttle lifted off just as energy beams hit the research station. The building turned into light and smoke. If they had been 30 seconds slower, Susan and her team would have died with their life's work. But the evacuation was far from over. New Dakota had almost 50,000 people spread across 6 major cities and dozens of smaller farming communities. The available ships could only carry about half that number. The rest would have to wait for a second wave of evacuations if there was time. Pete opened a channel to all ships in the area. This is Commander Johnson on the Big Sky. All vessels, we have confirmed alien attack on surface installations. Evacuation procedures are now emergency priority. Load every person you can carry. Forget comfort, forget regulations. Pack them in. The next 12 hours were hell. Ship after ship landed at evacuation points loaded far beyond their safe capacity and lifted off toward deep space. Families were split up as children were put on ships with strangers. Old people were carried onto vessels where they had to lie on metal floors. Pregnant women gave birth in cargo holds with no proper medical equipment. Pete's ship took on 800 people in spaces designed for 200. Dr. Amy Foster, who had transferred from Jake Morrison's ship, worked without rest to keep people alive in the overcrowded conditions. The ship's recycling system struggled to provide enough air and water for everyone. Commander, we're getting reports from other worlds, Carol said during a brief moment of quiet. The Void Hunters hit New Berlin this morning. Same pattern. Evacuation order, then systematic destruction of human facilities. Pete had heard about the Void Hunters. They were insect-like aliens who lived in the empty spaces between stars. Nobody understood why they suddenly cared about human colonies, but their methods were even more brutal than the crystallines. They didn't just destroy buildings. They consumed everything, leaving planets stripped bare. Any word from New Berlin's evacuation? Some ships got out. Maybe half the population. The insects didn't wait for the deadline. They started attacking 6 hours early. On the planet below, the last evacuation ships were leaving the surface. Pete could see them struggling to climb away from New Dakota's gravity, overloaded with refugees. Some were cargo haulers never designed to carry people. Others were personal spacecraft trying to save families of 20 or 30 in ships built for 5. Tom Evans was on one of those ships. Pete knew Tom from supply runs to New Berlin before the crisis started. Tom was an industrial coordinator, a quiet man who kept factories running and workers happy. Now he was probably watching his daughter Katie try to comfort her mother in some cramped cargo hold, wondering if they would ever have a real home again. The crystal ships began their final attack as the last human vessel cleared the atmosphere. Energy beams swept across the planet's surface like deadly rain. Grain elevators that had fed millions exploded into fire. Processing plants that had turned raw crops into food for dozens of worlds melted into slag. Transportation networks built over generations disappeared in minutes. But the worst part was watching the farms themselves die. Fields of grain that stretched to the horizon caught fire and burned. Orchards planted by the first colonists 60 years ago turned into ash. Rivers that had been cleaned and managed for decades began to run with chemicals from destroyed facilities. "Why are they doing this?" asked Carol. She was staring at the destruction with tears in her eyes. "We never hurt them. We just wanted to grow food." Pete didn't have an answer. The three major alien powers had been neutral toward humans for centuries. The Zephyrians, the Crystallines, and the Void Hunters had their own territories and their own concerns. Humans had always been careful to avoid conflicts, to trade fairly, to respect alien boundaries. Something had changed, but nobody knew what. His communication system buzzed with an incoming message from Earth Command. The voice belonged to Admiral Ben Carter, Jake Morrison's older brother. All ships in the New Dakota system, this is Earth Command. You are ordered to return to Sol system immediately. Do not attempt to land at any other human colonies. Repeat, return to Earth immediately. Admiral, our ships are overloaded with refugees. Some of these vessels won't survive a long journey. Commander Johnson, I understand your situation, but every human colony outside the Sol system is under attack or evacuation order. Earth is the only safe destination. We're setting up emergency facilities to handle the incoming population. Pete looked at the crowded corridors of his ship. 800 people who had lost everything, trying to find space to sleep on metal floors. Multiply that by hundreds of ships, thousands of refugees, and he began to understand the size of the crisis. Understood, Admiral. Setting course for Earth. Estimated arrival in 6 days. As the big sky turned away from New Dakota, Pete took one last look at the planet. The crystals were still destroying everything humans had built, but they weren't touching the natural environment. The mountains and rivers would survive. The native plants and animals would continue as if humans had never been there. It was like the aliens wanted to erase any sign that humanity had ever reached beyond their home solar system. Pete wondered if they would succeed. Right now it looked like they might. The journey to Earth stretched ahead of them. 6 days of trying to keep 800 refugees alive in impossible conditions. 6 days of listening to children ask when they could go home, knowing there was no answer. 6 days of flying toward a planet that hadn't seen this many returning humans in 3 centuries. Behind them, New Dakota's fires could still be seen from space, marking the death of another human dream among the stars. President Claire Adams stood at the window of her office in Geneva, looking out at the sprawling refugee camps that covered the Swiss countryside as far as she could see. 6 months ago, those hills had been green and peaceful. Now they were filled with temporary shelters, food distribution centers, and the sounds of nearly 1 million people who had nowhere else to go. The numbers were staggering. 847 million refugees had returned to Earth from the colonies. The planet that once held 8 billion people now struggled with almost 9 billion. Every major city was overcrowded. Food supplies that had seemed adequate were running dangerously low. The carefully balanced ecosystem that had taken centuries to restore was breaking down under the pressure. Madam President, said her aide, a young man named Kevin Thompson. The alien ambassador is ready for the broadcast. Claire nodded but didn't turn away from the window. Down there she could see children playing between the refugee shelters. They had been born on distant worlds under alien suns, but now they were trying to make Earth their home. Some had never seen an ocean or breathed air that wasn't recycled through ship systems. Earth was as foreign to them as their colony worlds had been to their grandparents. Put the broadcast through to my screen, Claire said, and make sure it's being recorded for distribution to all camps. The face that appeared on her screen was not quite human. Ambassador Zixathera of the Zephyrian Confederation had the tall, thin features of her species, with gray skin and large black eyes that seemed to look right through a person. She had been humanity's contact with the Galactic community for 10 years. Claire had once considered her a friend. President Adams, the ambassador said, her voice translated by computers into flat, emotionless English. I trust the relocation of your people is proceeding smoothly. You mean the forced evacuation, Claire replied. Let's use the right words, Ambassador. Your people and your allies have driven almost 1 billion humans from their homes at gunpoint. The Galactic community has reached a consensus regarding humanity. You are a destabilizing influence in this region of space. Your species spreads too quickly, consumes too many resources, and shows insufficient respect for established territorial boundaries. Claire felt her anger rising, but she kept her voice calm. This conversation was being broadcast to refugee camps across Earth. Her people needed to see strength, not rage. We followed all established protocols. We asked permission before settling new worlds. We traded fairly with alien species. We avoided conflicts. You bred too quickly, Zixathera said bluntly. In 3 centuries, you went from 1 world to 47 colonies. Your population growth was exponential. Left unchecked, you would have spread to thousands of worlds within a few more centuries. So you decided to stop us. The galactic powers voted. Earth is your quarantine. You will remain in your home solar system. Any attempt to expand beyond that boundary will be met with overwhelming force. The screen showed images from deep space. Massive alien fleets positioned themselves beyond Pluto's orbit. Zephyrian ships with their sleek curves. Crystalline vessels that looked like floating mountains. Void hunter swarms that moved like living clouds. All of them pointed toward Earth. This is your final warning, President Adams. Accept your limitations. Learn to live within the boundaries of your birth system. The galaxy has no place for humanity beyond Earth. The connection ended, leaving Claire staring at her own reflection in the dark screen. She had been president for 4 years, but nothing had prepared her for this. How do you tell a billion people that they can never leave their home again? How do you make one planet support a population it was never designed to hold? A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Come in. Admiral Ben Carter entered, still wearing his military uniform despite being back on Earth for 3 months. He looked tired. They all looked tired these days. Ben was Jake Morrison's older brother, and he commanded what remained of humanity's space fleet. 12 ships hiding in the asteroid belt, trying to stay out of sight of the alien armadas. Claire, we need to talk about the supply situation. She gestured for him to sit down. How bad is it? Food production is at 90% of capacity, but we're feeding nearly 9 billion people now. We'll start seeing shortages in major cities within 2 months if we don't do something. What about the agricultural colonies? Susan Blake saved seed samples from New Dakota. Can we start growing those crops on Earth? Ben shook his head. Susan's working 18 hours a day trying to adapt those plants to Earth conditions. But it takes time. Even if she succeeds, we're looking at months before the first harvest. People are going to be hungry long before then. Claire looked back out the window at the refugee camps. Down there, families were learning to live in spaces smaller than the closets they had once taken for granted. Former engineers were working as farm laborers. Scientists were teaching children in tent schools. Everyone was trying to adapt, but adaptation took time. What about the other planets in our solar system? Mars, Europa, Titan, already at maximum capacity. The colonies there are taking refugees, but they're facing the same resource problems we are. Mars can't grow enough food for their new population. Europa's life support systems are breaking down. Titan, Ben paused. Titan might have some options, but they're risky. Claire knew about the rumors from Titan. The research stations there had been working on experimental technologies when the crisis started. Some people whispered about breakthrough discoveries, but most of the information was classified above her level. Even as president, there were some secrets she wasn't allowed to know. Ben, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Can we fight back? The admiral was quiet for a long moment. Our 12 ships against 3 alien fleets? Claire, they have thousands of vessels. Our most advanced weapons barely scratched their shields during the evacuations. It would be suicide, so we're trapped. For now. Claire heard something in his voice. What aren't you telling me? Ben looked around the room as if checking for listening devices. There are people working on alternatives, I can't say more than that. But don't give up hope yet. 3,000 kilometers away in the refugee camp outside Denver, Steve Martinez was teaching his son Alex how to fish in a small pond that had been created for the children. The 8-year-old boy had never seen a fish before. On New Berlin, where he was born, all the protein came from food processing plants. Dad, why did we have to leave? Alex asked as he held his first fishing pole. I liked our house on New Berlin. I had my own room and a window that looked at the Purple Mountains. Steve didn't know how to answer. How do you explain to a child that an entire galaxy rejected his species? How do you tell him that the aliens thought humans were too dangerous to exist beyond one small world? Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that hurt kids, Steve said finally. But we're going to build a new home here on Earth. It might be different, but it can still be good. Will I ever see the Purple Mountains again? Steve looked up at the sky where the alien fleets waited beyond the reach of human eyes. I don't know, son. Maybe someday. But even as he said it, Steve didn't believe it. The galaxy had made its choice. Earth was humanity's prison and the aliens were the guards. The best his son could hope for was a life trapped in one solar system. Never knowing the feeling of seeing a new world rise over an alien horizon. In laboratories beneath Geneva, Dr. Patricia Wells worked with a team of the best scientists humanity had ever produced. They were trying to solve problems that seemed impossible. How do you feed 9 billion people on a planet designed for 8 billion? How do you process the waste? How do you manage the psychological trauma of a species that had been reaching for the stars and was now forced back into a cage? Patricia had been born on Luna and spent her career studying closed-system ecology. She understood better than most how fragile the balance was. Earth's environment had been carefully managed for centuries. Too many people too quickly could lead to ecological collapse, but she also understood human nature. People needed hope. They needed to believe that this was temporary, that someday they would return to the stars. Without that hope, the refugee camps would become permanent slums. Earth would become a dying world filled with bitter, defeated people. "Dr. Wells," said her assistant, a young woman named Laura Chen. "We're getting reports from the Arctic research stations. The ice is melting faster than predicted due to increased industrial activity." Patricia nodded grimly. They were pushing Earth's systems harder than they had ever been pushed before. Factories were running at maximum capacity to produce housing and supplies for the refugees. Power plants were burning fuel at unsustainable rates. The planet was showing signs of strain. "Any word from the deep ocean projects?" Laura checked her tablet. "Still classified, but there are rumors that they're making progress on something big." Patricia hoped the rumors were true, because right now, hope was about all humanity had left. The galaxy had rejected them, trapped them, and turned their own home planet into a prison. But humans had always been good at one thing above all others: surviving when survival seemed impossible. Outside, the sun set over the refugee camps, painting the sky red. Tomorrow would bring new problems. The elevator descended deeper into the ocean than any human had ever gone before. Dr. Rachel Kim watched the depth readings climb higher as they dropped through the darkness of the Mariana Trench. 11,000 meters below the surface, in a place where the pressure could crush a human instantly. Something waited that would change everything. "Dr. Kim, we're approaching the station," said the elevator operator, a Navy technician named Gary Walsh. He had been making this trip for 3 years, but he still looked nervous every time they descended into the deep. Rachel nodded but kept her eyes on the instruments. She had been working at the bottom of the ocean for 15 years, long before the refugee crisis started. When the aliens forced humanity back to Earth, most people forgot about the deep ocean research stations. They were too busy dealing with overcrowded cities and food shortages to think about what scientists might be doing in the deepest places on the planet. That had been exactly what Rachel and her team needed: privacy, time, and access to technologies that most humans didn't even know existed. The elevator stopped with a gentle bump. Through the thick windows, Rachel could see the lights of Research Station Deep Blue. It looked like a small city built into the walls of the ocean trench, connected by tubes and tunnels that glowed with artificial light. For the past 3 years, while the world above dealt with the crisis, 57 scientists had been working down here on something that would either save humanity or destroy it completely. "Welcome back, Dr. Kim," said Dr. Mark Thompson as she entered the main laboratory. Mark was a physicist who had once worked on faster-than-light travel projects. Now he was working on something much more ambitious. "The test results from yesterday are beyond our best predictions." Rachel looked at the device in the center of the laboratory. It was about the size of a car, made of materials that seemed to bend light around them in strange ways. After 15 years of research into dimensional physics, they had finally built something that could tear holes in reality itself. "Show me," Rachel said. Mark activated the device with a series of commands on his control panel. The air in the laboratory began to shimmer. Then slowly a section of the far wall simply disappeared. Not destroyed, not broken, it was just gone, as if that piece of reality had been erased. Through the gap, Rachel could see another part of the station that was supposed to be hundreds of meters away. "We can create stable portals up to 50 kilometers apart now," Mark explained. "The energy requirements are still huge, but we've solved the stability problem. A ship could fly through that gap and come out 50 kilometers away instantly." Rachel felt her heart racing. For 3 years they had been working toward this moment. The technology was based on theories that most scientists thought were impossible, but the refugee crisis had given them the motivation to try things that seemed crazy. What about larger distances? Could we reach other star systems? "That's where it gets interesting," said Dr. Linda Hayes, the project's chief engineer. She was a small woman with graying hair who had spent her career building impossible machines. We can't create portals to specific locations in other star systems, but we can create them to dimensional spaces that exist between normal space and other realities. Rachel frowned. I don't understand. Think of normal space as a sheet of paper, Linda explained. We've learned to poke holes in that paper and step through to the spaces between the sheets. From there, we can travel to any point in normal space almost instantly. Distance becomes irrelevant. The implications hit Rachel like a physical blow. If they could master this technology, humanity wouldn't need traditional spaceships anymore. They could step through portals and appear anywhere in the galaxy. The alien blockades around Earth would become meaningless. Have you told anyone above ground about this? Mark shook his head. President Adams knows we're working on advanced research, but she doesn't know the details. We wanted to be sure it worked before we got anyone's hopes up. Rachel walked around the device, studying it from different angles. It looked like something from a science fiction movie, not like real technology. But the hole in the wall was definitely real. She could feel air moving through it, carrying the scent of the station's recycling systems from the other side. How big can we make the portals? We've successfully created openings large enough for a small spacecraft, Linda replied. With more power, we think we could make them big enough for larger ships. What kind of ships? Linda smiled for the first time in months. Come with me. They took a transport tunnel to another section of the station. This one was filled with construction equipment and the sound of metal being shaped. In the center of the large space, Rachel saw something that made her gasp. It was a starship, but unlike any ship humans had ever built. Instead of the bulky, functional designs of traditional spacecraft, this vessel was sleek and elegant. Its hull seemed to shift and change color as she looked at it, like the surface of a soap bubble. We call her the Homecoming, said Chief Designer Matt Foster. He was a man who had spent his career building cargo ships and mining vessels. This was something completely different. She's designed specifically for dimensional travel. The hull can phase partially out of normal space, making her nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. Rachel walked around the ship, amazed by what she was seeing. How many people can she carry? In an emergency, about 300. But she's not designed as a transport ship. She's designed for rescue operations. Rescue operations. Matt's expression became serious. Dr. Kim, we've been monitoring alien communications for the past year. There are humans still out there. Thousands of them. Some are hiding on abandoned colony worlds. Others are being held in alien detention centers. The galaxy thinks they cleaned us out completely, but they missed some. Rachel felt hope stirring in her chest for the first time in months. How many? We estimate at least 50,000 people scattered across dozens of worlds. Families who refused to leave their homes. Scientists who stayed behind to destroy sensitive research. Children who got separated from their parents during the evacuations. And you think we can get them back? With this technology, we can appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. The aliens won't see us coming, because we won't be traveling through normal space. We can rescue our people and bring them home. Rachel looked at the ship again. The Homecoming wasn't just a rescue vessel. It was proof that humanity hadn't given up. While the world above struggled with refugee camps and food shortages, scientists in the deepest parts of the ocean had been building a way to fight back. When will she be ready? First test flight is scheduled for next week, Matt replied. If everything works, we can begin rescue operations within a month. Rachel made a decision that would change the course of human history.
I want to be on that first flight. Dr. Kim, it's going to be dangerous.
We don't fully understand all the effects of dimensional travel on human biology. There could be side effects we haven't discovered yet. There are people out there who have been waiting for us to come get them. Children who think their families abandoned them. Parents who think their kids are dead. We're not going to leave them waiting any longer. 3,000 kilometers above, in the refugee camps of Earth, people were starting to notice changes. Construction crews were working on mysterious projects. Scientists were being quietly recruited for classified assignments. Military personnel were disappearing into secure facilities. Steve Martinez was teaching his son Alex to read when he noticed unusual activity at the nearby military base. Large trucks were carrying equipment covered by heavy tarps. Aircraft were landing at night with their lights turned off. Dad, what are those people doing? Alex asked, pointing at the base. I don't know, son. Maybe they're working on ways to make life better for everyone. Are we going to stay here forever? Steve looked at his boy, thinking about the dreams he used to have of showing Alex the wonders of the galaxy. purple mountains on New Berlin, the crystal forests of Zeta Reticuli, the floating cities of the gas giant colonies. All of that seemed lost now, but something in the air felt different lately. People in the camps were whispering about hope, about projects hidden from alien eyes, about the possibility that humanity's story among the stars wasn't over yet. I don't know, Alex, but I have a feeling that things are going to change soon. In her office in Geneva, President Claire Adams received a coded message from Admiral Ben Carter. The message was short and simple, but it made her heart race with possibilities she had thought were lost forever. The Deep Ocean Project is ready for Phase 1 trials. Recommend immediate briefing for executive authorization. Claire looked out her window at the refugee camps that stretched to the horizon. 1 billion people who had been forced to give up their dreams and come home to a world that could barely support them. A species that had reached for the stars only to be told they were not welcome among them. Maybe it was time to show the galaxy what happened when you rejected humanity's children. Maybe it was time to prove that Earth remembered every single person who had been forced to leave their homes. The stars were still there, cold and distant. But soon, very soon, humanity would be reaching for them again, and this time they would not be stopped. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Homecoming as it prepared for humanity's first return to the stars in over a year. Through the viewing ports, he could see the blue waters of Earth's Pacific Ocean far below. In a few minutes, they would activate the dimensional drive and appear in the Kepler 442 system, where this whole crisis had started. All systems ready, Admiral, reported Dr. Rachel Kim from the science station. She had insisted on being part of the first rescue mission, despite the risks of untested technology. Dimensional portal generators are charged and stable. Jake nodded to his crew. Lisa Parker was back as his chief engineer, her familiar presence a comfort during this historic moment. Ryan Cole sat at navigation, ready to guide them through spaces that existed between reality and dream. Dr. Amy Foster waited in the medical bay, prepared for anything they might find. Take us through. Ryan, the young officer, activated the dimensional drive. Reality twisted around the ship like water going down a drain. The stars outside the window stretched into lines of light, then disappeared completely. For a moment, the Homecoming existed in a place that wasn't quite anywhere, floating in a gray space where the laws of physics worked differently. Then, with a sensation like stepping through a soap bubble, they were somewhere else entirely. The Kepler 442 system spread out before them. The planet where Jake had first witnessed the alien evacuation order looked peaceful from space, its blue and green surface unmarked by the destruction they had seen a year ago. But Jake knew that down there, in hidden caves and underground shelters, humans had been waiting for this moment. Scanning for human life signs, Lisa reported. I'm getting readings from multiple locations. Underground complexes mostly. Looks like our intelligence was right. Jake opened a communication channel. This is Admiral Morrison of Earth Fleet. Any human survivors in the Kepler 442 system, please respond. For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice came through the speakers, weak but filled with joy. Jake Morrison? My God, is that really you? It was Helen Carter, the colony administrator who had supervised the evacuation over a year ago. She had stayed behind with a group of volunteers to preserve what they could of the human settlement. Helen, it's good to hear your voice. How many people are with you? 287 souls, including 43 children. We've been hiding in the old mining tunnels. Jake, we thought you were never coming back. We're here now. Prepare for immediate evacuation. But even as Jake spoke, alarm signals began sounding on the bridge. Ryan was monitoring the long-range sensors, his face pale with worry. Admiral, Zephyrian ships are approaching. A full battle group. 6 heavy cruisers and multiple fighter squadrons. Through the viewing ports, Jake could see the sleek alien vessels moving toward them like hungry sharks. The Zephyrians had kept ships in this system to make sure no humans tried to return. Now they were coming to destroy this impossible human vessel that had appeared from nowhere. They're targeting us, Lisa reported. Weapons charging. Jake made a decision that would change everything. Dr. Kim, can we phase the ship partially out of normal space? The technology is untested at this level, but yes, we can try. Do it. Ryan, take us into the planet's atmosphere. We're going to collect our people. The Homecoming began to shimmer and fade as the dimensional generators engaged. The Zephyrian weapons fired, sending energy beams through the space where the ship had been. But the beams passed harmlessly through the partially phased vessel, striking empty air. The alien ships began firing wildly, trying to hit a target that existed partially in another dimension. Their sensors couldn't track the homecoming properly. Their weapons couldn't lock onto something that wasn't entirely real. Jake watched the enemy ships through the strange, wavering view that came from being phased between dimensions. "Take us down to the mining complex." Fast approach. The ship descended through the atmosphere like a ghost, invisible to normal detection methods. Below them, the abandoned human colony looked exactly as they had left it. Buildings stood empty. Equipment rusted where it had been left behind. But in the underground tunnels, people were preparing for rescue. The homecoming landed near the entrance to the mining complex. Jake and a team of Marines left the ship, wearing equipment that let them phase in and out of normal space at will. They looked like shadows as they moved, there one moment and gone the next. Helen Carter emerged from the tunnel entrance, leading a long line of survivors. Adults carried children and supplies. Old people leaned on younger family members for support. Everyone looked thin and tired, but their eyes shone with hope. "How is this possible?" Helen asked as she watched Jake's team load people onto the impossible ship. "The aliens said you could never come back." "Earth remembers its children," Jake replied. "We don't abandon our people." The evacuation took less than an hour. The homecoming's cargo holds filled with families who had spent over a year hiding in caves, wondering if Earth had forgotten about them. Children who had grown up in underground shelters finally saw sunlight again. Parents held kids they had thought were lost forever. As the ship lifted off, the Zephyrian fleet was still searching the sky for targets they couldn't find. Their advanced sensors showed empty space where the human ship should have been. Their commanders radioed increasingly frustrated reports to their superiors. "Phase us back into normal space for a moment," Jake ordered. "I want them to see us." The homecoming became solid and visible again, hanging in the sky above the planet like a challenge. The Zephyrian ships immediately opened fire, but Jake was ready. "Phase out. Take us to the next system." Reality twisted again and they were gone, leaving the aliens firing at empty space. In the ship's cargo holds, rescued humans cheered as they realized they were finally going home. The next stop was New Berlin, where Tom Evans and his family had been forced to evacuate. Intelligence reports suggested that several hundred humans were hiding in the planet's industrial complexes, avoiding the insectoid void hunters who had taken over the world. When the homecoming appeared in the New Berlin system, it found a planet stripped bare. The void hunters had consumed everything organic, leaving only metal structures and artificial materials. The world looked dead from space, but in the deep underground factories, humans had survived by eating recycled nutrients and breathing filtered air. When Jake's team found them, they were thin and desperate, but alive. Tom Evans cried when he saw the rescue ship, holding his daughter Katie as if he would never let her go again. "I knew someone would come," he said through his tears. "I told Katie that Earth doesn't forget its children." The rescue operations continued for weeks. The homecoming and 11 sister ships appeared at abandoned colony worlds across the galaxy. They rescued humans from crystalline detention centers, where people had been kept as specimens for study. They found families hiding in asteroid mining stations, living on emergency supplies for over a year. They evacuated research teams who had stayed behind to destroy sensitive data and were now trapped on alien-controlled worlds. Each rescue was a slap in the face to the Galactic powers who thought they had solved their human problem. The aliens had impressive fleets and powerful weapons, but they couldn't fight enemies who could appear and disappear at will, who could walk through walls and phase out of reality when attacked. On Earth, the refugee camps began to change. Instead of places of despair and overcrowding, they became centers of hope and reunion. Families separated by the evacuations were brought back together. Children met grandparents they had never seen. Communities that had been scattered across the galaxy slowly reformed on Earth's surface. Steve Martinez was working in one of the agricultural centers when the announcement came over the loudspeakers. His son Alex was playing nearby with other children, building toy spaceships out of scrap materials. "Attention all refugees from New Berlin colony. The rescue ship Determination has returned with survivors from the industrial underground. Families should report to Reunion Center 7 for processing." Steve grabbed Alex's hand and ran toward the center. Maybe, just maybe, his brother's family had survived the Void Hunter attack. Maybe some of their neighbors were alive. Maybe the community they had built over 20 years wasn't completely lost. At Reunion Center 7, Steve found more than he had dared hope for. His brother Paul was there, along with Paul's wife Nancy and their twin daughters. Neighbors from their old street. Work friends from the factories. People who had given up hope of ever seeing each other again. "Uncle Paul," Alex shouted, running to embrace the man he had thought was dead. Dad said Earth remembers its children. President Claire Adams stood before the United Nations Assembly, addressing not just Earth's leaders but representatives from refugee communities around the world. The assembly hall was packed with people who had once called dozens of different worlds their home. "The galaxy told us we were not welcome beyond our birth system," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "They said we were a virus to be contained. They scattered our families and destroyed our homes, thinking that would be the end of humanity's story among the stars." She paused, looking out at faces that had seen loss and desperation transform into hope and determination.